I grew up in a small town nestled in the mountains, the kind of place where everyone knows each other and stories of the past are passed down like family heirlooms. One such story haunted our town, a legend so deeply woven into our history that no one dared question it: the Whispering Forest. It was said that the forest at the edge of town wasn't like any other. During the day, it looked like any normal patch of wilderness: tall trees, dense underbrush, and the occasional deer or rabbit. But at night, something changed. The trees seemed to come alive, and the wind would carry strange whispers through the branches. No one knew where the whispers came from, but everyone who grew up in our town was taught to stay far away after dark. I never believed in the stories. They seemed like old wives' tales, designed to keep kids from wandering off and getting lost in the woods. But when I was 17, something happened that changed my mind forever. It was a warm summer evening, and my friends and I were gathered around a bonfire at the edge of the woods. We had all heard the warnings about the forest, but none of us took them seriously. We were teenagers, invincible, or so we thought. The fire crackled in the center of our little circle as we passed around cheap beer and laughed at old jokes. "Why don't we do something exciting for once?" Ryan, one of my best friends, suggested. He was always the one pushing us into trouble, always looking for the next thrill. "Like what?" I asked, leaning back against a fallen log. "Let's go into the forest," he said, his voice daring us. "I mean, come on. We've all heard the stories, but has anyone actually seen anything?" Everyone else groaned or rolled their eyes, but deep down, I could tell they were intrigued. We had grown up hearing about the forest, but none of us had ever dared to explore it after dark. The idea of finally breaking the rules and testing the legend was tempting. "Let's do it," I said, surprising even myself. I wasn't usually one to go along with Ryan's wild ideas, but that night, something about the forest called to me. Maybe it was the beer, or maybe it was the unspoken challenge in his voice. Either way, I found myself standing up and brushing the dirt off my jeans. The others hesitated for a moment, but eventually, everyone agreed. We grabbed a few flashlights and started toward the tree line, laughing and teasing each other about who would chicken out first. As we stepped into the forest, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The air grew colder, and the light from the bonfire behind us seemed to fade faster than it should have. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting together to form a canopy that blocked out the stars. It was darker than I expected, even with our flashlights cutting through the gloom. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. At first, we could still hear the sounds of the night: crickets chirping, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. But soon, even those faded. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. "Do you hear that?" Sarah, one of the girls in our group, asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We all stopped, listening intently. At first, I didn't hear anything, but then there it was. A soft, faint whisper, like someone speaking just out of earshot. It was so quiet, I couldn't make out any words, but it sent a shiver down my spine. "It's just the wind," Ryan said, though he didn't sound as confident as usual. We kept walking, but the further we went, the louder the whispers became. They seemed to come from all around us, circling us like a predator stalking its prey. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something, or someone, was just beyond the reach of our flashlights. "Maybe we should turn back," Emily, another girl in our group, suggested. She sounded scared, and I didn't blame her. The forest had an oppressive, almost malevolent presence, and the whispers were getting harder to ignore. "Don't be a baby," Ryan shot back. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" I asked, my voice tight. "We're just wandering around in the dark." But Ryan didn't answer. He was already pushing ahead, his flashlight bobbing in the distance as he walked faster and faster. I had no idea what he was looking for, but I had a sinking feeling that it wasn't something we wanted to find. Suddenly, the whispering stopped. The silence was deafening. It was as if the entire forest had gone still, waiting for something. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the trees with my flashlight, half expecting to see a face staring back at me from the shadows. "Guys," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling, "where's Ryan?" We all looked around, realizing for the first time that Ryan was gone. He had been ahead of us just a moment ago, but now there was no sign of him. His flashlight beam had disappeared, and the forest seemed even darker without it. "Ryan," I called, my voice echoing through the trees. There was no answer. "Ryan," I shouted again, panic creeping into my voice. Still nothing. We huddled together, unsure of what to do. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe he had wandered off. Maybe he was playing a prank on us. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The forest had swallowed him whole. "We need to find him," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We can't just leave him out here." Reluctantly, we started walking again, calling Ryan's name as we moved deeper into the forest. But the whispers had returned, louder this time, and they seemed to drown out our voices. The trees pressed in closer, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands. I could feel the weight of the forest bearing down on us, as if it were alive and aware of our presence. We were about to give up when we saw it, a flicker of light up ahead, barely visible through the trees. "That's got to be him," Emily exclaimed, relief flooding her voice. We rushed toward the light, pushing through the underbrush and branches until we reached a small clearing. But when we stepped into the open space, we froze. The light wasn't coming from Ryan's flashlight. It was a lantern, an old, rusted thing hanging from a low branch. The flame inside flickered and danced, casting eerie shadows across the clearing. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. There was a figure standing beneath the lantern. It was a woman, tall, thin, and impossibly pale. Her hair was long and matted, hanging over her face like a curtain. She wore a tattered, old-fashioned dress, the kind you'd see in photos from the 1800s. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and though her face was obscured, I could feel her eyes on us. No one moved. No one spoke. We were all too terrified to even breathe. Then, without warning, the woman lifted her head, and I saw her face. Or rather, the lack of one. Where her eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was only smooth, pale skin. A blank slate. It was as if someone had erased her features, leaving nothing behind. But somehow, she was still watching us. The whispers grew louder, filling my head, telling me to run, to leave, to never come back. But I couldn't move. None of us could. We were rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. The woman took a step toward us. That broke the spell. We turned and ran, crashing through the forest in blind panic. I didn't care where we were going. I just needed to get away. The whispers followed us, growing more frantic, more insistent, but I didn't dare look back. We didn't stop until we reached the edge of the forest, gasping for breath and covered in scratches from the branches. The bonfire had burned down to embers, and the town lights twinkled in the distance. Ryan never came back. We searched for him for days, but there was no sign of him. The police combed through the forest, but they found nothing. No tracks, no flashlight, no evidence that he had ever been there at all. To this day, I don't know what happened to him, but I do know one thing. The stories about the Whispering Forest are true. There's something in those woods, something old and evil, and it's still waiting. And every time the wind blows through the trees, I can still hear the whispers.